How does this secret club that claimed to be all about, like self-improvement and, making communities better and stronger end up as these villains in this conspiracy theory? And why do these theories still follow them around today? So to understand the answer, we need to go all the way back to where the Freemasons actually came from. Okay, so when did the Freemasons actually start? Great question. I'm glad I asked. Honestly, no one really knows for sure. You see, with any of these secret societies, actually finding the first time that Freemason was used in literature might not be the first time that it was actually thought of as a society. So there are a ton of different stories and theories about when the organization actually first began. One of the more popular theories is that the Freemasons are an ancient group that goes back thousands of years. And according to this theory, King Solomon of ancient Israel founded the organization back in the 10th century BC. I mean, we're talking like 3,000 years ago. And the story is like this. Solomon, for all of my Jews watching, you know who Solomon is. He's the guy that built the first temple. Now, in order to build this temple, he hired a Phoenician architect. Now, it is sort of conjectured, not necessarily through biblical accounts, but often through oral tradition, that this architect was this Phoenician guy named Hiram Abiff, or Hiram Abiff. And basically, he was this master designer that actually designed the temple and constructed it. Now, some Freemasons believe that Solomon and Abiff worked together to create this secret brotherhood so that they could pass down the mysteries and the secrets of the temple to future generations. Now, there's all sorts of other sort of like lore and theories behind this, that Solomon was able to use like this secret ring that was given to him by one of the archangels to basically control demons to also help him do this, and that Hiram Abiff was privy to this demonic sort of architecture and construction that they were able to use to, the supernatural force to build the temple, yada, yada, yada. That's a whole different theory. But let me explain more about this guy, Hiram Abiff, because he's like really fundamental to Freemasonic beliefs even to this day. Abiff was supposedly this brilliant architect, and his job was to build the temple that would house something known as the tabernacle, the Holy of Holies. And here's where the story gets a little dark. According to Freemasonic legend, 3 apprentices who weren't worthy of knowing these secrets of building and architecture attacked and murdered Abiff. And the story is so important to Freemasons that they actually reenact it during their secret ceremonies. They use it as an allegory, basically, which kind of just connotes like a deeper meaning. Now, the Freemasons are all about allegory and stuff, so we can get into some of the rituals a little bit later. Now, some Freemasons have made even crazier claims about their history. They claim that famous historical figures like Julius Caesar, Noah from the Bible, like literally Noah and his ark, the mathematician Pythagoras, and even Achilles, the legendary Greek warrior, were all Freemasonic members and leaders. Pretty wild, right? Okay. Now, here's what basically most modern historians and scholars actually believe. The Freemasons probably started in like medieval England. Probably not ancient Israel, but maybe they kind of drew on a lot of these sort of, sort of like biblical stories to build their lore. And it's a lot less mysterious than the other stories, and it actually makes, more sense from kind of like a scholarly historical perspective. So what is the connection to medieval England? Well, there are these things called speculative lodges, which were basically like these honorary groups. And these speculative lodges were based on real like operative lodges where like actual guilds of working stonemasons, like guys that would literally like cut stones and build castles and churches and basically all the buildings and infrastructure you see throughout medieval England. They would basically form like these unions or these guilds where they would all meet together, they would share ideas, and they would kind of teach other apprentices to become master stonemasons. And this is where the Freemasonic sort of, society really evolved from these medieval craftsmen who basically built up the entire society. Now, the Freemasons historically were a male-only group in England, which relied heavily on sort of ancient symbolic rituals and secrets. And as time went on, something interesting started to happen. These rich nobles and other powerful men in these communities wanted to join these stonemason guilds, even though they weren't actual stonemasons. So the guild started letting them in as like honorary members. Because think about it, if you're a stonemason, you're trying to build stuff, if some noble from a nearby town is like, hey, can I join your club? They're going to be like, yeah, this is great. You're going to help us actually further our agenda in building stuff. But it became sort of like a status symbol. And so they started to attract fairly well-to-do men. So basically, if you had money, a little bit of nobility, you knew the right people, you could become a Freemason, even if you never touched a stone in your life. And then effectively, these groups became sort of like social clubs or fraternities for the wealthiest, most intellectual, smartest, most well-connected men through all of England. And the best evidence we have about the real roots of Freemasonry come from these sort of medieval stonemason guilds in England. According to historians, the first written record of what they call sort of like these old charges, like the sort of initiation of the Freemasonic guilds, show up in a town known as Shropshire, England, around 1430, which roughly 600 years ago. Now, these old charges, what are those? They're basically a collection of documents that laid out the rules in the history of Masonry, like literal Masonry. And the oldest ones we know about go back to about like the 14th century, which means like, they're hundreds of years old. And these documents are super important because they contain one of the most sacred rules of Freemasonry. Now, this secret that no Masons could share is basically this. No member is ever allowed to reveal any secrets about any other brother if doing so might cost that brother his life or property. Now, this rule is about keeping secrets, and, it's absolutely fundamental to what it actually means to be a Freemason. Now, the old charges also spelled out very clearly who was allowed to become a Freemason and who wasn't. First of all, they only recruited men. So automatically, women were just excluded from the beginning, from the get-go. Sorry, ladies, go join like a lacrosse team or something.